Okay, so to start, I want to make a patch that switches between a crap tone and a good tone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a wah pedal after all my signal. So I'm going to push on this button, go down to wah. Then I'm going to select the weeper wah. By default it's off, so I'm going to hit bypass and that turns it on. But I want to make a patch that will automatically switch. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly touch foot switch 8. Then I'm going to select type latching, click OK. So now the weeper's on, and I can hit it off to make the good tone or whatever. Okay, something else that we need to know is that if we go to our global settings, go over to MIDI, that the MIDI bass channel is set to 1. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up FL Studio or Fruity Loops. And then we're going to hit F10, and that's going to open up our MIDI menu. So we're going to make sure that the line 6 is selected, make sure Send Master Sync is selected, and also that port 1 is selected. Okay, close that. Now we're going to select a new pattern, one that isn't being used. Then we're going to hit the plus button at the bottom of the channels window. And we're going to select MIDI out. This is going to push our MIDI signal to the Helix pedal. So on this, notice that channel 1 selected, that's good. We're going to select port 1, because remember when we did our MIDI menu, port 1 was selected. Then we're going to click the little gear icon. We're going to give this a name. So I'm just going to call it Helix FS8. For a short name, I'll just call it FS8, and that means foot switch 8. Maybe I'll call this Helix wah. For the controller, it's going to be 55. And that's the value that needs to go in for foot switch 8. If you look on the Helix documentation, it lists which foot switches correspond to which CC value. And to make it a lot easier, anytime the value is changed, it's going to toggle the foot switch pedal. So instead of doing 0 through 127, I'm just going to do 0 to 1. That means when it changes from 0 to 1, it'll toggle, or from 1 to 0, it'll toggle. We're going to select channel 1, then click accept. So now when we toggle this back and forth, we can hear the wah activating. Okay, now we're going to still make sure that our pattern's blank that we selected. And we're going to right click and click Edit Events. I'm going to zoom out by doing Control and then the scroll wheel down. And I'm going to use the pencil tool. So I'm going to put it all the way up to the top. Now if I use the pencil tool, it's either on or off. And that is because we set it to 0 or 1 when we configured it. So that range 0, 1 is going to make this selection a lot easier to work with. Instead of doing 0 to 127, we have very limited flexibility in what we can select. It's a toggle, so 0 and 1 makes a lot more sense. So now that I have everything selected, I'm going to click again just after the second measure, the beginning of the third, with the pencil tool, and I'm going to drag the mouse downward. And that just took everything after the second measure and turned it off. I'm going to scroll over to the 7th measure, click again, and then after the 8th measure, I'm going to click again, scroll down. So I have a section where it's on, then off, on again, and then off again. Okay, so now we're going to move our window out of the way. We're going to paste our automation clip into the playlist window. So we can see that we have that on section, an off section, then an on section. If we drag this out, we can see that it's off again. So I'm just going to make a really simple pattern. So this is just a click track. This one's just a double kick pattern. Okay, so we're going to start the pattern. So right now I have the good tone going. So I drag the mouse to the beginning, and then I'm going to click spacebar to play. So you can hear that the wah was on during this section, off during this section, then on again during this section, and off again during this section. But one thing to note, I think Fruity Loops is a little sensitive to this. You can hear the wah is off right now, and when I just clicked once on here, it turned it back on. So if I click again and I were to hit play, my wah is engaged. When it hits this section, it's going to toggle, turn the wah off, on, off, then on. So that's just something to know. It's a little goofy. So what I suggest doing is making sure manually using the Helix pedal, turn the wah off to begin with at the start of the song, then push play on your song.